Welcome to the Y Podcast. This is your host, Young Cornbread. And for the third episode, I have my brother here with me, DJ Mad Max.
What's going on, Andrew? I appreciate you having me up here on the Y Podcast. Shout out to you and everything that you're doing on your independent platform. People got to support the independents out here for real.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. You know, this is coming up 2 years of me being independent with Cornbread Media. You know, I started my business in August of 2020.
That's right.
So this independent grind it's a different one because, you know, all the resources that you have to gather is, you know, by yourself. And, you know, I'm kind of like a solopreneur because, you know, I'm doing everything by myself right now. But eventually I'm working to like, you know, build a team and stuff. So it's been dope.
And you're
far.
doing that. You had the internships in college with Sway on Sirius XM. You got all the experience out there, and I'm sure you're going to be in the station one day. If not, your own platform's going to be popping for sure.
Yeah, man. You know, we'll see, man. With it, you know how things are going right now. You know, everything is up for grabs. So it is what it is. But
Yeah, man.
getting into your story, man. You're hailing from Connecticut. What part of Connecticut are you from?
I'm hailing from Fairfield County, Connecticut. Grew up in Norwalk, Connecticut, and I'm blessed to be born and raised there. I grew up in a diverse community, so it put me in the landscape of understanding other people's walks of life and just listening to hip hop. Hip hop was detrimental for me growing up there, and just hearing it around and just being in that diverse and being a part of the culture of hip hop. And that's really fundamental, and why I'm probably here today, just being all interested in the hip hop and just wanting to have a career in it and having a show based on it.
For sure. And you come from Norwalk, Connecticut. So what was it like growing up there, you know, in your youth?
It was great. I enjoyed growing up there. It's really the main reason why probably that I'm so understanding of other people's and other walks of life, because I've understood how, what people go through different walks of lives, and
For sure.
and just I've seen how police operate, and when we talk about police brutality, I've seen certain incidents and heard stories from people that have gone through it. So it's maybe understanding from people who have those stories, and where people who may, like, say, white people who have grown up in white neighborhoods,
Right.
they might not have understand that, but I understand that by seeing what they're going through and hear what they hear, because sometimes people just turn a blind eye to these things.
Absolutely. And especially with everything that happened from 2020, you know, with the George Floyd, with the George Floyd protest and, you know, police brutality and that being captured on camera, you know, that was very serious. I think that was really the first time that we seen people of all different walks of life, you know, really start to stand up for it. Now, was it genuine? I'm sure, you know, some acts were genuine. I can't speak for everything, but like, you know, it was definitely something that put a shift, I would say, for sure.
I remember when I did my interview with my son a few weeks ago, he said white people have been protesting at all these protests that are going on when an innocent black man is killed.
For sure.
And it's insane because, when I went to high school, I went to one of the whitest high schools out there. It was a Catholic school, and it's closed now, thank God. There is a God. I went to a Catholic school, closed, right?
Yeah.
So I went there, and I remember just being outnumbered because I came from a black neighborhood, and I just remember them looking down and just hearing things like about just conservative viewpoints.
Right.
So that they didn't think that it was real. And I was telling them, like, there's stuff goes down. It's like, you got to go
For
out
sure.
there and do your research. Because I remember when Alton Sterling was killed with the CDs. He was selling the CDs out there in front of the store. And it's like, how do you not see that? You watch the camera and they're trying to make excuses just about, oh, well, he was moving funny, or they're not just going to kill someone innocent. I remember a kid telling me that, and I'm like, really? That's some white privilege stuff right there. Can I curse on here?
Yeah, you can curse.
Okay, that's some white privilege shit right there.
No, for real. And I remember you telling me about that because, you know, when the situation with Colin Kaepernick had happened and you were talking about freedom of speech.
Yeah, yep.
So most of the students that went to like your schools and stuff, it was a private school, right?
Yeah, it was a private school because I'm from Norwalk, so I went to Stanford, and then the private high school was in Stanford, and I went there, and I really didn't have the best of times there, and I just kind of stayed low key when I was in high school, but I was not the one to just sit there and listen to people talk, and I always had to speak the truth on things, on what I saw, and just kept to myself about it. I didn't really fit in with a bunch of preppy kids. That's not where I came from.
Right. And I remember you telling me this was like off the record,
Yeah.
but you would say that even some of the white students, they would call you like Wigger and
Yeah,
stuff like
they
that,
would.
right?
Yeah, they would. They would call me that. They'd be like, "Oh, why does Max act black?" And they would say that, and it's like
Mm,
that's just I'm just born. That's how I born up. So if people understood me and understand where I grew up, they'd
yeah,
understand why I am a certain way and why I like what I like.
for sure.
Same way why they act like they like. You know what I mean? Because and what their interests are and how they grew up. I think it's all about life is all about a learning process and just putting yourself in each other's shoes. I think if people put themselves in other people's shoes, I think they would understand things differently and they just
Mm,
don't. So they just go with their closed mind and their own viewpoints and they don't dip out the box. They'd rather stay boxed in.
mm. And with you being, influenced by hip hop so much, like how did you get into hip hop, as a young child, would
I'd
you
say my
say?
introduction was Nelly's Country Grammar, and I was like,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
early 2000s.
Right.
So that was my favorite rapper growing up when I was younger because I was like one or two in the car. My mom was playing it in the car ride with me. So when he'd be like, "Hey, must be the money," so I'd be saying, "Hey," like along with the song when I was like
Yeah.
1, 2 years old. That was like probably one of the only words that I could make out during that time. And from there it just grew. I was putting the band-aids on my face, like
Yeah,
the
right.
stripe. I remember I was doing that when I was younger when he came out with Nellyville and Hot in Here. And then from there I grew on to like Eminem and 50 Cent. Those were like my main three growing up, like real young. Then it started expanding into the later 2000s with Lil Wayne and then Drake. But once I found Wu-Tang, once I heard I had this greatest hits playlist of the Wu-Tang, and I remember hearing the projects the first time, and even Cash Rules Scary Hours,
Right.
Cash Still Rules Scary Hours. I remember hearing those two songs, and that was my introduction to Wu Tang, and then that was my gateway into the '90s hip hop scene. And man, that's how I look at hip hop differently now because when you see hip hop coming out today, hip hop back then had a message. The
Mm.
beats were different, and people always say, "Oh, well, it's the beats that are popping today." The beats were more popping back then. Premier, Pete Rock, and what they were doing with the jazz samples on those beats, you can't beat that.
No, for sure. And it is something that kind of gets overshadowed because, we have so much conversations, like we just
Yeah.
jump right into it, but like, we always talk about like bridging the gap between the old and the new. And rest in peace to DJ K Slay. I know that you
Absolutely.
interviewed him.
Yeah.
That was a couple of months ago, right?
That was actually, I think it was the year of COVID. I think it was in October of 2020.
Okay.
I can't remember um, the exact pinpointed date, but we did do an interview. I had a great time speaking with him, and he was someone that always rest in peace to DJ K-Slay and given the opportunity to even interview him and talk about what he's done for hip hop and just the album that he had out at the time and when he was doing Rolling 110 Deep. Because I know he was about to come back and do Rolling and 200 Deep or something like that. He had a bigger list plan. But just talking about it because he was someone that always kept it real with the hip hop and invited you up to the station. If you had bars, he didn't care if you had 5 followers, 1,000 followers, 2 million followers. If you could rap, you were on his platform.
Right.
And that's what we need in hip hop. Enough of the people letting these people in here just because they buy fake views and they got money because they got clout on Instagram. What happened to the real prophets of hip hop that were actually spreading a message in their music? Because that's the thing today is that there's not a message in there. I'm not saying people can't make their money. You can make your money and that's cool. And being a DJ, I had to play some of the stuff that you're hearing on the radio. But at the end of the day, take me back to Nas. Give me something that Nas was doing. Give me something that Lauryn Hill was doing. Give me something that Public Enemy and NWA were doing. We don't need to hear about money every day and clubs and partying because life isn't a party all the time, 24/7. We all
That's
go
a
through
fact.
things. We've all gone through our depression phases. These rappers today, I just feel as though they don't speak on it a lot. But you do have people like Nipsey Hussle. We talked about him. Dave East.
Yeah.
Dave East is another great one out there that's doing great things for hip hop and has a message. And, those people should be held up more and given their flowers because
That's
they
for
deserve
sure.
them instead of people like 6ix9ine who's out here ratting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, that's a fact, man. And what I was gonna say with DJ K Slay was, I know that a part of that interview, he was talking about like the younger generation paying homage, to the older generation, and I think the disconnect comes in to where there's not enough education.
Yeah.
That's really the younger people, they're not really doing their research. For you. Your start was Nelly, but then you ended up going back and, doing the research. And as for me, I want to say like the first hip hop artist I was introduced to, the first couple of hip hop artists I was introduced to, Nas and Biggie. Those were the two, like,
Two East Coast goats.
yeah, those were the two rappers that I first like really like started listening to because you know, when I was growing up as a kid, like my dad, like he always listened to Life After Death.
Mhm.
Like he always listened to that album. And I remember he lost the second CD. So I was
'Cause it was a
thinking,
double
yeah, it was
CD.
a double disc, right? So I always remember like growing up as a kid, I knew that there was two discs, but I always remember hearing the first CD and thinking like, oh, that's like the full album or something like that. But then I remembered, I'm like, nah, it was actually a double disc. And also with Nas, with Stillmatic, that was the first Nas album that I ever listened to. And I
Ether.
remember, I remember listening to that on the CD player in like 2002. Like I was actively like saying like, yo, I want to listen to this. And then after that, it was 50 Cent. And then, you know, who else? De La Soul
De
with
La
3
Soul,
foot,
Potholes
3
in My
feet,
Lawn.
3 feet high and rising. Like I remember like listening to that album in elementary school because that was like a big influence for me. You know what I'm saying? So I just feel like that education really isn't there. You know
No.
what I'm saying? Especially with the, you know, the young people. Like you could hear it in the music now. Like, you know, it kind of seems like a lot of people are just following the trends of, you know, whatever's hot.
And you're from Boston, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna give the praise out here. Someone who's really underrated, doesn't get brought up as much as he should be, and you can consider him a top 10 MC of all time, is Guru. I was listening to Moment of Truth the other day, and I said, that's one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time, from the beats to the lyrics, the production, Above the Clouds, with you got Inspector Deck on there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk about an underrated group, an underrated duo, Gangstar, and Guru's never brought up in the top 10, top 25 MC discussions ever, and that's a crime to me.
I would agree, man, because, you know, it's just like the education isn't there. And also with Gangstar, you know, they didn't have as much of the commercial success as some of
No.
the other artists, you know, coming out during those times in the 90s and stuff like that. So they don't really get their just due.
No, they don't. They don't. They're definitely one of the underrated ones out here. People should go do the research on them if they haven't heard of Gangstar. I mean, one of the greatest duos of all time, DJ Premier and Guru. Rest in peace.
For sure. Now, getting into like your start in radio, you know, talk about that. Like, how did you get started in your career?
How I got started in my career was just going up once I got into college and going to St. John's. I needed to join a club that was of my interest, because my first semester there in 2017, I was just getting acclimated and just understanding how college worked.
Yeah,
with
being
academics.
in New York.
Yeah, being in New York and getting getting used to the whole process of everything, going to your classes and understanding the college schedule. Then comes second semester is when I leaped right to the radio station, and I had to go through the freshman center, and the people in the freshman center didn't even know where the radio station was. And I had asked like two people, where's the radio station? And then they eventually told me where it was. I went up there, and you were the first person I met at the radio station. And you showed me the ropes there when I first started and just told me what I needed to do to get my show, get your 10 hours, sit in on shows, take a board test. I actually made a mix for my board test. And I remember
Yeah,
I remember
that.
And then from there, I think I got my hours done within like a week.
You were pretty quick about it.
Yeah,
yeah, you were pretty quick about it.
I went right in there and I got my hours. I got my show, and you were my first guest on my show because I wanted to have someone I could talk to just to break the airways for my first show, because I like having a guest on my show because it's very guest oriented. Because when you usually have a radio show, they're giving you guests. You have this big call-ins. And I didn't have a following at that time because you're starting from the bottom up, the ground up. So I said, I'm going to bring Andrew in here. And I think we had a conversation about the Jets and the Patriots. And we talked about some sports. And then from there, it just went on. I remember I started out with independent artists and just built the confidence to start reaching out to hip-hop legends to come on my show. And I'd say like the first one to really put me over the edge and building my confidence was Mike Geronimo. Master IC is a Queens legend right there. And shout out to Mike Geronimo for being my first prominent guest in the hip hop world and give me that confidence to go on. Because from there, my Mike Geronimo interview was my sophomore year, very beginning of my sophomore year in college. And from there, it just took off, as everyone who follows me has seen.
Right. And how would you say, like, your experience with doing college radio? Like, what did you learn from it, I would say?
It taught me the ropes and just how I think the radio station is run, and just building within yourself, because you're teaching yourself at the end of the day when you're at college radio, especially where we went. We had to teach ourselves because the radio program at St. John's University wasn't taken seriously. So it was kind of, you just kind of fend for yourself.
Mm.
And we did that. So I taught myself the ropes, and I kind of got better over time. Like, when I'll admit it, like when you go back and I listen to some of my interviews from my freshman year, I don't think they're the best interviews. People are like, oh, they're good. But from where I'm at now,
Right.
it's completely different. And it's the growth process. If you can notice that you have growth, you've obviously learned something, and you're meant to be where you're at today. Because once you have growth, that's how you know you're going to be successful at something that you do.
Absolutely. And backtracking a little bit, I know that before you even got into the radio industry, you were also into movies as a child.
Yeah.
So does that play a role in, your radio career at all, or is that something that is a little bit separate, would you say?
I think, you know what, everything happens for a reason, because like you said, I was in the movies and film growing up. I know I always liked horror movies growing up, from Jaws to the old Universal monster movies. I'm a big horror movie guy, you know that. So I remember being young and writing to these guys. I think this is where we're leading it to, writing to the big directors in Hollywood, and writers and actors, and some which are going to be seen on the show. I wrote to John Carpenter, who made Halloween, The Thing, The Fog, Escape from New York. Wes Craven, rest in peace to Wes Craven, the horror master, the greatest writer and director of all time. He did Nightmare on Elm Street, The Hills Have Eyes, Last House on the Left. He did the Screams.
Right.
And then I wrote to Francis Ford Coppola. He did The Godfathers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was writing to these guys, writing to their fan mail address, and they all wrote me back. And there's a bunch of other people, but the ones that were special to me were the ones I mentioned: John Carpenter, Wes Craven, and Francis Ford Coppola, because originally I wanted to be a writer and director for horror movies. And they wrote me back, and it meant the world to me at that time, because I was 9 or 10 years old doing this.
Wow.
So it was just crazy to believe that you can have a contact with a celebrity like that at that young of an age. So once I got older, and this connects to radio, when I was reaching out to people, and when I was reaching out to Wes Craven and John Carpenter, I was asking them for advice on and just how to get into the movie making business at this young of an age, and what they did in their careers, and how they made films and put things together. And so when I think about it, I was already kind of interviewing people at the age of 9 in my own way, even though it was on a small piece of notebook paper, writing to these people. And it makes you think, like, was I kind of always trying to interview people from that age, I would say. And then just thinking about it from today, I'm still reaching out to people to get on my show. So I was always not afraid to contact celebrities. It was just never in me.
It was like natural.
It was natural.
You would say.
It was like I was born with it. Like I like there's certain people that ask me to, like, I don't know how you talk to these people. I don't know how you write to these people, but it just came natural.
Mm. And what would you say, like, from reaching out to, these figures, these public figures, like, what was one of the lessons that you learned, or something that you took away from it? Because you did it at such an early age. A lot of kids, at 8 and 9, I know I was like thinking about playing video games and stuff like that. I wasn't thinking about, let me try to write to, one of my idols. I was just seeing them on the television screen, but I didn't think to take it that deep. So what made you want to do that?
I think I wanted to do it just because I was so interested in it at the time. And I'm big on never be afraid or get discouraged if someone tells you no. Just always take the chances that are out there. Never be afraid to go and try something. And if it says no, don't get discouraged from it. Never let anyone tell you no, because who are they to tell you no? You go out there and you chase your dreams. That's how I look at it. And from that standpoint, and just what I was looking for, because when I was younger, I had a journal and I was writing my own horror movies when I was younger. So I think I was really serious at that time. And even being 9 years old, to really just figure out what I would want to do in my future, because I had my mind set when I was younger. I wanted to go to a film school, and then things changed. And eventually I went to St. John's and got into radio. But I mean, if you look at it, because I was so into hip hop and I was so into sports, I was always growing up listening to WFAN, being from the tri-state, listening to the sports talk, big sports fan. So it kind of just all spiraled from that. And now you look at it today, it's like I'm doing radio. And then I talked to you before, and I'm sure we'll bring it up later, is that now I'm pursuing acting now.
Right.
And we'll get into that a little later. But I think everyone's just coming full circle, 360 degrees.
Most definitely. Because, everything, like you said, it's a process, and it's about growth.
Yeah.
It takes time to go through, certain things, as far as you reaching out to people, and also getting the knowledge and understanding of it. Because, at least for me, I know I had to build up the confidence because, you know, for myself, when I started radio, that was in 2013, and I was
In high school.
yeah, I was in high school, and that's something that's kind of unheard of because most high schools, they don't really have like radio stations like that. You know what I'm saying? So
That's a rare occurrence right there,
yeah,
and you took advantage early.
yeah, man, and that was something that, you know, at the time when I started like doing radio back then, I was like 16, and this year, like I'm 25 right now, so it'll be like 9 years in September of me doing radio. And it's
Congrats on
like,
that.
you know, I'm only starting like my third podcast episode, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like, to me, I'm like, damn, that's a lot of growth because, you know, I know all the steps that I had to take to get there, you know, as far as like my mentors, you know, teaching me and schooling me along the way, you know, it was a huge process, you know. And just like how you said, you know, when you go back to like your first like interviews or your first couple of radio shows, because a lot of the radio shows that I did back then, they were never really like recorded. Like I don't have the recordings of them or anything like that.
Mhm.
But I just remember the feeling of having to go through that process of starting out doing automated shows and then, you know, eventually like doing live shows. But in the process of that, learning the mixing board and just getting comfortable with, you know, speaking on air. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it definitely is a process,
Yeah.
man.
And people need to recognize that just because what you don't see doesn't mean that there's something isn't going on behind the scenes, because you put a lot of work in the episodes that you do behind the scenes. Each
For
episode,
sure.
you do, like what certain people do, like what these people do up at these stations, they're handed everything. So they don't have to do much work. You, as an independent person, you have a lot of pride and you put a lot of work into each episode to make it like a person's journey. And salute to you for that, because there's not a lot of people out there doing that. You know, they'll have a podcast with a few of their buddies and they'll talk about some topics, but you're trying to highlight people's journeys in this, and that's real right there. And I appreciate you for that.
And that's a part of the,
Yeah.
you know, the why is understanding, you know, not only why people do things, but just more so like giving that knowledge. Cause I would consider myself like a journalist, but also
Absolutely.
like an educator. So people could watch this podcast and, you know, they could pick up, you know, a gem or two and apply that to whatever they're doing. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Most definitely. So with you being independent right now, I know that you want to get into, you know, a station. Like what is your, you know, what do you plan on doing with that? Like working for a radio station, or you want to stay independent?
Right now, I've been looking for work in radio, but I'm staying independent until there's a position that opens up that I feel as though is right for me.
Right.
Because in the end, why am I going to go be a producer or a board op when I can do on-air work? And it doesn't have to, you don't have to give me the primetime slot. You can give me some off hour. I'll do it. I've interviewed some of the biggest people in the industry. You know, just give me an opportunity to prove myself within your station.
Right.
Because I proved myself independently. I proved myself in college. So it's just from there where I'm not going to be waiting around much longer. And this is where it branches out into this thing. I'm going to start looking for TV work. I just recently got an agent.
Right. You was telling me about that. Yeah.
I recently just got an agent. So I'm looking for TV work. I want to do red carpet interviews. And
Right.
I'm hearing that that's a possibility. I can do red carpet interviews at big events. So that's something that can really get my feet wet. Acting, I'm considering bridging into acting. I'm ready to take that on full time now and just work my ass off and to become a household name. So it gets me connections, because life is all about connections. We talk about this thing called politics, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about politics because that's a key word out there. It's all about who. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
That's a
Because
fact.
I already know a lot about hip hop and sports and stuff. So now it's all about who you know.
Mm. And you also talked about moving out to the West Coast, potentially moving out to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel like that's going to help you with the whole networking process as far as getting into the acting world?
Yeah, I'm ready to pull a Pac, trying to go to the West Coast. You know, I think I'm ready to go out there because, you know, just from people that I've interviewed and know all forms of entertainment have told me just the connections that you make as soon as you're out there, you could run into a CEO of some label or
Right.
or an actor who's an up and comer. You can always run into someone and make those connections. Whereas if you're out in the tri-state like Connecticut, there's nothing out there. In my opinion, there's nothing out there. In New York, it's a big place. It's a small place for certain people because it's so big, but people know New York pretty well if you're here. But for me, I feel as though that my time is kind of maxed out in New York a little bit. I just feel like it's maxed out because, just being here in college and making the connections that I made there and trying to get in these buildings and just knowing a lot of people, I want to broaden my demographic of connections that I've already made. And I think LA is the place to be because, especially if I want to get into the film side of things.
Right.
There's a lot more opportunities in LA. They call LA the land of opportunity. So I think that's where eventually I see myself within a year or two. I'll say I'll be ready to get out there because I'm going to save up some income and get out there and pursue whatever lane it is that I'm ready to start pursuing here on a serious level, because I'm going to keep going with my show because we know that that's a dream of mine to do interviews and do radio. But if I'm not going to let here and sit here and let people, dictate who gets in these positions with the politics side of things. I'm going to go out and get what's mine.
And that's very commendable because a lot of people, I know that we both talked about it, but, applying to radio stations, and you just getting rejection letter you're getting rejection letter after rejection letter. And a lot of people would have crapped out and be like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to do something else, or I'm going to, lower my standard. But you're like, nah, I want to go out to, if I'm not getting the opportunity here in New York or Connecticut, I'm going to go out to Los Angeles and try my luck out there. And I was telling you, I'm like, bro, I think, I feel like you're doing great for yourself right now because you have a lot of connections that you've made in the industry. You have a catalog of interviews. And I'm like, damn, like this is impressive, man.
Does,
at your age.
At the end of the day, like what you said, because on the outside, people are like, oh, you're winning, you're building this platform. But at the end of the day, that's what matters right there. And at the end, when you're making a career and you got income coming in, because I'm independent right now, I'm not making income off that.
Right.
So that right there is the main thing in the end.
The money.
The money. Because like at the end of the day, I could be interviewing all these people and I'm grateful for that. But it's like I got to survive out here too. Bills to pay, student loans. I hope Biden keeps pushing that back and gets that get rid of all that student debt for all the students out there, so we don't got to pay that. Because you know why? We know why also we should get rid of student debt, because we're left in debt. And in colleges, they don't show us the way to get jobs. They don't teach us that you got to have that middleman job coming right out of college, and that you may not get that job that you want right out. Like they don't prepare you for that. They just sell you a bad bill of goods. Oh, you get that white piece of paper. You get to do what you want to do in life. Bullshit. You don't do that. You struggle like the stories that we hear about. We don't go right in there. Only a few people get right into in this industry and get to do what they want to do. And what's that lead back to? Politics. It's all who you know. And it being at the right place at the right time.
That's for real, man. And that the big thing that you said about it was like money. Like I know a lot of people are looking at this cover art because like a lot of the cover arts, like it matches like the theme of the episode.
It matches well.
And one thing that I was thinking about is time is money. And money is something that you can spend it, you can always make it back, but time is something that you can't get back. And that's one thing that the pandemic taught me, because I'm like, wow, like when the pandemic first started, I had just turned 23. I was thinking like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start doing all these different interviews for my business. Then boom, COVID-19 hits. And it's 2 years later, and it's just like, wow, where did all this time go? And it's something that it just gives you time to really think about it, because, it's just been so much craziness that's been going on in the world. So it's kind of hard to, manage or, juggle that. And speaking of the pandemic, like, how did you react? How did you, deal with everything that's been going on recently?
First and foremost, I think the appropriate thing would be to do here is rest in peace to everyone that lost a life and lost a loved one during that time, during the pandemic, because the news doesn't want to cover it anymore. They cover their own agendas, and they don't speak about COVID still going on out here. People take it as a joke, and that's just a disgrace in and of itself. But it taught me ingenuity, because at that time, you know, I was still running my radio show as a junior in college. So I had all these interviews lined up and scheduled at that time. So I had to figure out a way that I could still continue doing my show from home. And that's when I established my webcam with the camera. Then I eventually was able to pick up Zoom. I got some money saved up for Zoom, and I started doing the Zoom interviews. And I, to be honest, I think COVID really boosted my career, because everyone was sitting in the house and I was able to interview all these big people like Fat Joe, Fabio Foreign. I was interviewing Michael Rappaport. I did all these big interviews. So COVID kind of saved my career. You kind of got to take the positives from a negative. You always got to find something positive in a negative situation. And I think the fact that COVID did happen, that really solidified me. And, you know, I was solidified before, but COVID just brought my radio game up to another upper echelon.
That's interesting, because, you know, you do hear a lot of people saying that, you know, with the pandemic, like, that was one of the, you know, it's still going on, but like in the beginning of it, you know, everybody was just so hamstrung on being in the house and stuff. And I'm like, yo, this is the perfect time to really start to build up and becoming just a little bit more mentally strong and self-aware, because that's what I had to do. Because I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, I was sleeping on the couch in my apartment. Like, I literally had nothing, bro. Like, I was broke as shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was selling clothes, you know, just to feed myself. Like, I was down to my last. And the crazy thing was, like, right as the pandemic, like, really started, I'm talking about, like, the shutdown in March. Like, that was that same week I had just started working. And it was through, like, a temp agency, because, you know, I wasn't getting no looks or no jobs or no anything. You know what I'm saying? Coming out of college. And I was just dealing with a lot. You know, I was telling you before, you know, like, right after I graduated college, my older brother went to prison.
That's right, yeah.
And then also my mom was getting hip replacement surgery. So I was traveling back and forth from New York City to Boston to, like, just trying to manage all these different things. And I'm like, damn, like, you know, and I still got to make my pape at the same time. You know, I still got to support myself. So I'm like, yo, this is crazy. And I moved into a new apartment. So when we did have that time to, like, really, like, sit down and, like, you know, not really go anywhere because of, you know, everything was shut down, you know, it just really makes you think, like, damn, like, how can I boss myself up, in a sense?
And you did that. You figured it out. And your mom is good? That's what matters. Your mom's good from that hip?
Yeah. She's good.
Good.
But getting back to, like, with the pandemic and stuff, what was your reaction on the government response? Because, you know, Trump was still in office at that time. So, like, what was your reaction to his, I don't know, managing or handling of this situation?
If you want to call it that. I mean, he fumbled. He fumbled big time. I mean, he should have shut the country down as soon as we had that one case in here and close it off, but he didn't. And then he didn't take it seriously. He was downplaying the cases and the deaths that were going on around the country. And it's like, he's the reason why we're still going what we're going through. You know, he didn't do enough to shut it down. And people are blaming all the mask mandate. He is the reason why this has been politicized. How do you politicize a virus? It kills everyone. It kills Democrats, it kills Republicans, it kills independents, it kills everyone from all races. How could you politicize that?
For sure.
But he managed away. Donald Trump managed away. And, you know, thank God that he's not in office anymore. And I hope that he doesn't get back in after these 2 years. But he's the reason why we're in this mess. You know, I know people that lost jobs, and a good friend of mine, and we know him. I don't want to bring up his name to make him feel uncomfortable or anything, but he had a good job with the New York Jets. And as soon as COVID came along, that was it. He was let go of the job and wasn't brought back. That's COVID right there. People really lost their jobs. People lost their lives. And people didn't hold him accountable because they look at him as a joke. You know, he's the comedic relief. Like when you go on Twitter and you hear people, oh, I missed the way that he said, the way he said China. You know, it's like people looked at this guy as a comedian. It's like, you can't have that guy in office. You need a real politician in there. He was a clown. You know, he was never taken seriously. And something that makes me crazy, no one holds him accountable with Trump, is the Central Park Five. Why is this guy on Method Man's album after that situation? Why is he accepted by all these rappers? You know, if you look back at the Central Park Five, how did this guy fly under the radar for years? and wasn't held accountable when he said bring back the death penalty.
Right, because of, with the whole situation.
Yeah.
And I do remember him saying that.
No one checks him on that. They all let him back in, and these people with money like Puff Daddy, have him at his parties. He should have been banned at these hip hop parties. What was he doing here? But it's the money, and people are sellouts. But just because he has money, they're sellouts.
Do you think it was not only the money, but do you think it was like the
power?
Like the fame that he had as well too. Because he had his show The Apprentice. Like, I remember being a little kid, I was a fan of Donald Trump, but this was when I was like a little kid. So, I didn't know. I was just looking at the money too. And I would love when he would say, "You're fired." Like, I would love that shit. And then
it's crazy. I always thought he stole that from Vince McMahon because of the WWE, and I don't have any clarification on who started that first. If I had to guess, it was probably Vince McMahon because Trump can't come up with an original idea on his own. But for me, like I do think it's the fame, and you know what? I think you're seeing some serious things in here in the situations with Jeffrey Epstein and his connection with Trump. How he was killed in the jail for things that he had. So I think a lot of these celebrities that we even like, that we haven't even heard of yet, I think they may have some ties with it where Trump has dirt on these people.
So that's why you feel like a lot of people don't want to speak out?
Yeah, that's probably why as well. I think that could be. Very well could be.
I mean, hey, look what happened to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
And there's still not even that much information on that. Like, how did he get killed in jail like that?
Apparently, his neck was snapped, but we know what happened because Trump was in cahoots with him. You look at the pictures and you watch the documentary on Netflix, he was in cahoots with him big time. But he was president at that time, so what's he going to do? He's going to save his ass, and that's what he did because Epstein was going to give up whatever he had. He had dirt on so many celebrities that we still haven't seen all the remnants of it. And I think his girlfriend, or whoever the one that was recruiting all the underage girls for him, I think she's in Brooklyn right now being held on charges. She was found guilty, actually. She was found guilty on it. So it's going to be interesting if we see more people who were involved with that whole scandal get called out on it and that they were involved, because you're seeing Prince Harry or the King or whatever, he was involved with them too.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. I haven't seen the documentary yet. I know there's a lot going on with it, but I haven't really seen it yet. So I can't speak on it like accurately and know exactly what I'm talking about, to be honest. But yeah, it is something that just make you think like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Man?
It's
how do these people even get in these positions,
Money and maybe politics. It comes back to that root every time with this world. The number one focal word is politics. It's all politics and who you know and just power.
For sure. And how do you think, with what you're doing right now, because you're on the independent grind, how do you think that you'll be able to potentially change those, politics to help people like us get in the door, or just, get that, exposure?
I've grown an appreciation for podcasts, being independent, because I was always the one, radio is where it's at. But politics, with everything, and then we talk, radio is more the politics side of things, where podcasts, you can have a conversation like this. On radio, you can't have a conversation like that because they limit what you put out on their airwaves. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I've grown from an appreciation of that, and just look at what I've been able to accomplish, and it's a blessing. Thank you to God and everything for the people that I've been able to sit down and interview. I've proved that you don't need to have a place in one of those seats at those big buildings, because I did that in my own way, because I did it in college, but look what I've done independently already. You can interview who you want to interview. There's no one stopping you.
For sure.
These radio stations aren't stopping me.
And I feel like they wouldn't even, with the radio stations, there's a lot of talent that's coming up right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are a lot of up-and-coming radio personalities. And I know the people that are in position, they're seeing it right now. They know that, we're coming.
Yeah. They aren't us.
But how do you feel like, is there a way to, I don't know, build those connections, would you say, with some of the mentors and, in the radio game, like Sway, that's one of my mentors, and I was an intern for his show. So, that connection is there. But, as far as other personalities, do you think that, that would be a possibility?
No.
Without having the internship? Because even with to get a radio internship, you have to be enrolled in school. So
Yeah.
imagine all the people that are, do have the talent to do radio, but they can't afford to be in school, or they just don't have the access. What do you think about that?
Mhm. I think, with me not having an internship, I just built my own platform. I interned for myself because that's what you told me junior year when I couldn't get an internship, and I proved myself on my own platform that I can do the work and in who I was interviewing. But as far as like making connections within the radio industry with these personalities, absolutely not. I wouldn't. You can have a different approach. Like my approach is, I don't look at these people as allies because I look at interviewing and because I've dealt with some of them. I reached out to some of them, and a lot of them are threatened and have blocked me on social media. Okay, and we can get that's a whole other story. But I don't look at them as allies because I look at this interviewing game. And shout out to the people that have came on my show and shown love. And I'll read a couple of the lists. DJ
name some of those personalities.
Sus One's come on my show. DJ Wonder, shout out to him. He blessed my platform. He came on. I'm trying to think who else I had on. Headcrack from Dish Nation.
Mm-hmm.
I had him on. Tony Tone, who's on Hot 97. And I've had a couple more people. DJ Chuck Chill Out. A couple people come on my platform. And I'm not talking about those guys. The guys that came on my platform, I'm not talking about. And because those people showed me love and gave me great advice. I'm talking about the people that I reached out to and gave me the cold shoulder, and they know I'm there because you've said it. You think my name's running through this industry.
Yeah.
And I just look at it as like I don't look at them as allies because I look at interviewing and doing a radio show the same way as at battle rapping and MCing.
Right.
They can't touch me because I do so many. I do over 8 hours of research on each guest.
Wow.
I do when I get these big guests, especially. I put a lot of work into my interviews, and you can notice that within like the past 2 years, how much work I put into my interviews. So I look at it as there's no personality out here that can touch me inside those buildings. That's how I look at it. And that's how you know that you're really great at something, and how anyone out there in any field, whatever it is, you could play basketball, you could play tennis, whatever it is, if you feel as though you're the greatest at what you do, then you know that you belong in a certain position. But that's how I look at it. I just look at it as, no one can touch me in those chairs. You can't put a price on it.
And do you feel like even if you were to get, in one of those positions, do you feel like the company, like, or the radio station, do you think they would understand your vision? Because you do put so much into your interviews and they are very in depth, and you're not the type of personality that's just going to be trying to pick at the headlines or ask, the controversial questions. You're going to ask them some real shit. You know what I'm saying? And really dive into who, whoever you're interviewing is as a person. You're really going to get to build a solid conversation. So do you think they would understand that, like your vision?
At the end of the day, I think they're all about themselves because you look at like all these personalities that go in there originally, you hear how they had a vision and then it changed in the end. And then you talk to these personalities like Drewski. Shout out to DJ Drewski too, because he is someone that loved that New York hip hop where he's like, that's the stuff that we like. But when you get in there, you have to play a certain type of music. So it's people go in there with one vision. You're not going to change me. Like, I have my mindset about it. Like if I'm making money and that's how I'm going to have to survive, then yeah, I guess I'm going to have to do that. But we're going to have to come to an agreement here where I can do what I want to do too.
For sure.
That's how the only way we're going to meet both ways there is if I can help people out with what I want to do, and then we accommodate what you want to do because it is your station. So it's I scratch your back, you scratch my back situation.
For sure.
Just to look at it. Everyone eats in some sort of way. So you're not going to put me in that chair and play 6ix9ine when, I want to play who's some of the real rappers out here right now that we got. We got the Griselda guys, play them. Let's hear the real rap on these radio stations. How about have a throwback hour to educate the youth on the real hip hop? Because you look at all these shows, they don't have the throwback hours anymore on these radio stations anymore. It's all rotation of the garbage, the mainstream garbage that you hear, and just on all these shows, the TV shows too. I mean, BET, they took away the hip hop summits, they took away Rap City Basement, they took away 106 in Park was a huge influence for me growing up. So they took away everything that was fundamental to the real hip hop culture, and that's why we have what we have here today and the artists that we have here today. When you look at the top charts on iTunes, I don't know. I don't even like classifying it as hip hop in a way, because hip hop to me is Nas and Big. It comes with it has a message. Like you have some party tracks in there, but you gotta put the message in there too. And you're not gonna tell me, oh well, it's not suitable for radio because back in the day it got some airplay. It didn't get the most airplay, but there was something there.
Right.
There was
substance.
Yeah. Yeah. People were like I have conversations with people that lived in the 90s. They're like, oh, you can't dance to that music. They found a way to dance to that music.
Right.
They found a way. This is all excuses.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
I think it's just something that should be, spoken on like a little bit more. Like even with my boy Blake Breeze, he now goes by B. Ali, and Quentin Levon, and also my boy Ja. We actually went up to 1520 Sedgwick Ave, which is the birthplace of hip hop, because I just wanted to see it. I'm like, I wanted to learn a little bit more about DJ Kool Herc because
the founder of it all. Yeah, you go into the Bronx, you learned about Cold Crush and all that. Yeah,
I just, I'm the type of person like, I want to know, how did this start? And in order to know where you're going, you have to understand where you come from. So in order for hip hop to get to a healthy space, which I feel like there's a great balance in hip hop. I don't know if you agree or not, because I feel like this is the first time where we really seen, the OGs in hip hop. And then you have even younger generations after that, like, J. Cole's song, Middle Child. I love that song just for the message that it has, because he's talking about how he feels like he's in the middle of all of this. So, he has like different generations that's before him, because, you have the Nas's, the Biggies, Mobb Deep. And then you have even a generation after them, which we were talking about, which is like the 50 Cents, and the T.I.s and the
Lil
Nellies and Ludacris.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like all of those artists are still doing their thing today. And then on top of that, we have like the newer generation of rappers, like the Lil Babies and, the Babies and, Moneybagg Yo.
Baby, right? There's always another one out there somewhere.
But I feel like this is the first time in hip hop where we're seeing so much, kind of like diversity. And I think it's good because at one point in time, like even when we were kids, there was a lot of ageism in hip hop. Like how we were talking about, certain rappers, like we didn't know, how old they were necessarily. And it seemed like after you turn 30 years old, it's just like you're considered old.
Not anymore. Look at Fabio.
Yeah.
When we bring up a bunch of rappers nowadays, it doesn't matter how old they are. Yeah, they're old too. And it doesn't matter anymore. And something else that I think we should touch base on too, to kill these radio stations about, is that how about we play rappers from back in the day who still release material? They don't play those albums anymore. Like you still have De La Soul still releasing songs here today.
For sure.
You still got those 90s rappers that are still dropping songs. I mean, you'll hear Nas on the radio, of course, because he's like an empire.
Right.
So you'll hear that on there. But what about the smaller acts that are legends of them? Where's that music getting played?
For sure.
They don't play it anywhere, and that's something else to me that, Diamond D, he's got I did a couple interviews with him from DITC. He's got the Dime Piece 2 out, and he's got crazy songs on there, productions, because he's a legend and what he's done for his production and digging in the crates. But we can hear some of the songs off of the Dime Piece. Why can't we have that?
For sure.
Do
you think that the radio stations feel like there's no money in playing that type of music because, they have ads that they have to run and they want to try to milk and get the most money out the situation? So do you feel like, if they were to take those risks, do you feel like they feel like it's not profitable for them? How would you view that, would you say?
I would view that as I feel as though they're trying to appeal to a younger demographic, but what about the older demographic? Because then you have them all listening to WBLS, so you need to bring in an older demographic. You can go in there and try to preach to the young as much as you, and that's the lack of education side of things, because they don't do the throwback hours anymore. So how are you retaining the older demographic if you're playing Lil Uzi Vert and these guys? So they're not going to want to hear that. They may turn it on and try it out, but at the end of the day, it's not what they listened to growing up. It's not. So you got to have something for everybody. WBLS, what's crazy is actually I heard them play Pop Smoke. I heard them play. I'm starting to hear them play younger people. So now the older music is really starting to go out the door now, and that bothers me. Someone that cares about hip hop and even R&B. that just bothers, because you gotta play that out there. You really got to keep that going out there for the hip hop. These stations say where hip hop lives. Where are you giving back in the end? Because you got to get back to where it all started.
That's the truth, man, for real. And with New York being the birthplace of hip hop, you got your Mets gear on right now.
Yeah.
And we here in the Brooklyn podcasting studio, and changing, a little bit of topics, but how do you feel about just the overall, changes in New York? Because we always talk about the essence. So, I know you had Sky Zoo on your show.
That's right. Shout out to Sky Zoo. All the brilliant things we did. We did an interview for his album.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about that, because there has been a lot of changes going on in New York. So, talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So, like, when you look at it, I mean, Sky Zoo and people from New York would know more about it, but I remember when I had him on, we talked about gentrification, because where I grew up in Norwalk, they took all the sneaker stores out. Now it's all like, it just looks like some kind of Vineyard Vines strip mall all up and down where I grew up. They took all the sneaker stores out, all the jersey stores, all the urban outlets that I grew up going to.
Right.
So now, like, if you look at it from what Sky Zoo's point of view, he said he doesn't even recognize Brooklyn anymore from where he grew up. I mean, he said that, and this is a perfect thing, and we said this on the car ride here because it's close to here. The Barclays Center is the epitome of gentrification in New York, especially Brooklyn. Because when we look at New York, the Knicks are the root of New York. I don't care what anyone says. You could put KD, you could put Kyrie, you could put LeBron, you can even get Jordan out of retirement to even coach the team to be the Nets. The Knicks will always be the heart and soul of New York. The Nets are the gentrification factor of it. Because look at all the big things, that the big companies that are coming in New York all of a sudden, all these buildings and the condominiums that are all getting put in for these low-income housings and kicking people out of their homes.
Yeah.
That's something right there that Sky Zoo said to me, like, and then the album cover was important because it was him showing his son that this was here where he grew up, but now it's some big condominium.
Yeah, it's a new construction site. I seen that because I was watching your interview with Sky Zoo, and it was just interesting because I never really heard of a rapper saying like they wanted to make gentrification as a focal point of their album. I'm like, yo, that's very creative. So when I seen the album, I said, oh shit. Like, I was like, wow, this is like a real, you see like all this stuff changing. And even, it's happening citywide. And we were talking about on the ride over here too, like, it's crazy how even with the pandemic where, everybody's struggling, it's crazy how all these major corporations have all this money
for construction. Yeah,
yeah, they don't stop, They don't stop, man. Like, even in Queens, 'cause I live out in Queens, right? Go to Jamaica Avenue now. Oh my God. Like, yo, they're building like these high-rise
not surprised.
Yeah, luxury condominiums. I'm like, yo, this was not here when I came to New York back in 2015.
No.
And they're ripping and running through it. And even in Queens too, because the New York, the Long Islanders, the hockey team, they recently built
the new stadium.
Yeah,
and that screwed up their season because they went through COVID and they had to wait because they had to play all away games.
Really?
Because of that. So, yeah, because the stadium wasn't finished. So now they're losing on the road. The COVID hit them, and that's why they didn't make the playoffs this year. But I'm a Ranger fan, so.
I noticed with that, right, the UBS arena, because where they used to play before was at the Nassau Coliseum, in Uniondale. And then they ended up moving over to Belmont, which is like right on the borderline of Queens and Long Island. And like literally you could walk from the UBS arena to Queens Village, which is in New York City. So I was thinking to myself, like, damn, like even areas that I thought that they weren't going to gentrify, like they
figured out a way.
Yeah, they figured out a way. It's crazy, bro. It's really crazy.
It is.
So how do you, like, when you do go back to Norwalk, is there anything left there that reminds you of, what you grew up like? Because I know you said there was a couple of housing complexes that they, like, tore down and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it always feels like a sense of home because that's where I grew up. But it's not the same that I know because everywhere I went when I was younger, places that I traveled to pretty much are something different now. All the restaurants I went to, all the sneaker stores I went to, all gone. So it's like a place that I don't even know. But, it's still got that feeling in the air. It's still Norwalk, but it's not the same Norwalk that I knew growing up.
Mm. And it's crazy that's happening in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And Norwalk is pretty close to New York City, so a lot of those people that were probably living in parts of the city probably had to get pushed out to Norwalk.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was asking you, I was like, where do you think those people that were living in Norwalk before, where do you think they moved to?
I couldn't even tell you, man. It's just a tragic thing because they kick people out, and it's like you just got to fend for yourselves and go where you can get where you can fit in. And I don't agree with that, how people are just kicking people out like that, and it's a shame.
It is, man.
It's all money. Everything's all monetary.
And you know what's crazy, right? Like, even with this whole gentrification thing, like, this is happening like nationwide. Because, my mom's side of the family is from North Carolina. And they're even, dude, I swear to God, like, they're even gentrifying like the rural areas of North Carolina. Like, because, I have family in Clayton, North Carolina. And, this is a small town, it's probably like 20,000 people there. And they're building luxury condominiums there. Like, I remember certain parts of that town where there was just like, it was forest and stuff like that. And now they tore that down, and now they're building all these luxury condominiums. And I'm like, if they're doing that in, rural areas, like the big cities, they don't really have much of a chance.
No.
That's scary.
It is. And it's happening fast. Like the way that they're building these things.
Yeah.
They're up in the middle of the night. It's like you go to sleep and you wake up and they're there. That's how fast it's happening. It's like, it's crazy. Yeah. It's so unrecognizable now, especially where I grew up. It's like all around it, it's just condominiums, and that's not how it looked when I was younger, and it just went up out of nowhere.
For sure. Have you ever heard of Gray Star Enterprise?
No, I haven't.
So they're like the top multifamily unit developers in this country, right? And their CEO, Bob Faith, there's a YouTube video of it, which I'm gonna share on my Instagram page. But this was back in like 2010. So these dudes, like they had like this conference meeting, like this big conference meeting, right? And he was doing like a interview. It was like 3 minutes long or whatever. And he talks about how, talks about certain markets, and he talks about being a tactical investor. And what he was saying was that they look for, there's two types of investors. There's people that are investing for the short term, and then you got people that's investing more for the long term. And they said with these tactical investors is that they look for like distressed markets. And I know, like you said, like Norwalk, the area that you come from is, it's the hood. So that was like a distressed market that I don't know if Gray Star Enterprise had any, condominiums that they were developing there, but it just goes to show you, because even in my neighborhood, I didn't really know too much about gentrification like that. Like I remember in Boston, the first time that I really started seeing them do like all these building up these new properties was back in 2010. So this was right after the 2008 recession.
Yep.
Yeah. And they started building townhouses. They weren't building the luxury condominiums. But because we were recovering from the 2008 recession, like a lot of Black people were moving into those townhouses at the time. And then there was another, there was like a whole neighborhood that they kind of built in Boston where they put up, like, it's a nice ass neighborhood, bro, but it's in the hood, and it's like right off of Blue Hill Ave, and they built like all these houses and stuff like that. They didn't build no luxury condominiums. It's like single family housing. Now you don't even see them building single family housing. And what happened was, because the housing market was so messed up, there was more people of color that were able to afford and move into those properties. But now you're starting to see, 10 years later, we get into the 2020s, people, they're not able to afford to move into those luxury condominiums.
No. I mean, you look at the rent prices for like one rooms, it's astronomical. The prices through the roof for just one bedroom room. That's it. Just a one bedroom condominium or just apartment anywhere. the inflation level has gone up and everything, and not just
Yeah.
housing. We talked about this before as well. It's just, how do you make a living nowadays, and the minimum wage being $10
In
and some,
Connecticut,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
it's like $10 in Connecticut. And but what's it in New York?
I don't know what it is in New York, but I know in the city is 15.
It's like 15.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you can't
how do
live
you
off.
You can't live off that.
It's hard to live off it. And I have a minimum wage job right now because I work at Shake Shack.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was getting no opportunities. You know, I tried to apply to different radio stations, and you know, I didn't get in.
Yeah,
It's okay.
And you know what you do? You came here to do your show with the Why podcast. Why?
Sure.
Because this is what you do, and you're not going to back down and let that discourage you. And I salute you for that, because
I appreciate
there's a lot
that.
of people that give up on that. And don't give up on any lane that you're looking to achieve out there, and let anyone discourage you, because at the end of the day, you're driving your life.
Right.
You're your own driver, so you can't tell me to pull over.
Right.
Who's a radio station tell me to pull over? So you come here and you do your show and just build your platform up from there, and it's going to keep growing. It's going to grow and grow and grow. Keep making connections. Keep bringing people on, and letting people express themselves. That's the main thing, because you're letting people tell their story.
For real. And I'm putting up like my own money, and
Yeah.
that's one thing that the pandemic also taught me too, is just try to find ways to become more financially literate, because prior to the pandemic, I knew nothing about like investing.
Mhm.
And I realized like once the pandemic started, I'm like, wow, like, I have all this time. Let me teach myself some stuff to, help better my situation and whatnot. So, I learned a little bit about the stock market and stuff. And, also with the money that we were getting too, like if you had a job and you got laid off or whatever, or you just couldn't work because of the pandemic, you would get what is it called? The PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance.
Mhm.
And I was getting those checks. So a lot of that money that I used from that, I was paying off bills that I had owed, like thousands of dollars in bills, bro. And then some of the other money I took to like invest in my business, because I'm like, yo, when am I gonna make this like lump sum of money again? I don't know the next time I'm gonna come across some cash like this. So let me be wise about this situation. And I know that, I have aspirations of being the CEO one day. So let me invest in my business. And that's when I created the Cornbread Media LLC, because I was like, I have the money and it's time to make a move. I can't wait for, a radio station to say like, oh,
because you'll be
up.
bald
Yeah.
and 40 with a beer gut. You can't do that. you want to go out there and get it now, and that's how people should do it. Like, age discrimination. Who are you to tell us that we got to wait till we're 30 or 40 to get in and do what we want to do? I ain't waiting. You're not waiting. No one should wait. You know what? I'm not waiting till I'm 40. I'm not. That's why I'm branching out and looking to be successful in another lane and build myself up in that way and get what's mine.
That's a fact, man. And that's something that a lot of people, they may not have that tunnel vision to be like, yo, I'm just going to go out and get what's mine. But a lot of people will respect it, but they may not even speak on it.
No.
But I just know for myself, like, I'm in a position where, if my business does get successful, I can help out the people that, I do care about, and give opportunities to, up and coming personalities, people that can, really just share their stories. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
We can all learn from each other. Just like, I learn from you, you can learn from me,
Absolutely.
and we share the knowledge,
Yeah. And just, letting people have their stories and then things that, they can speak on, being a voice for the voiceless, because you give the voiceless a voice at the end of the day.
And that's what, the Why podcast, that's one of the reasons why I started it, because, you get to hear like these stories, like, when you look back on it, you'll be like, damn, like I seen this person start out, from the grind up, and they had to really make a way for themselves, because it's not every time that I get to be in the studio. It's not like how I was in high school, in college, I could go to a station every day. Now I got to save up my money in order to record. But it just makes it, all that much more rewarding, because it's like, I'm really taking my time, and, I'm trying to make the right investments, and, hopefully that builds into something great. Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah. You were there from the ground up for me, for sure. I know that, there through difficult times, and I appreciate that.
No doubt, bro. No doubt.
This whole game, teaches you to keep your friends close and keep a tight circle of people. You know what I
For
mean?
real, yeah, yeah. That's most definitely. Now, getting back to your radio career, I know that Dave East, like that's one of, that's your favorite artist out right now,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Of
my
the
favorite.
newer generation.
That's my favorite artist out right now. I was on him since Black Rose and Hate Me Now was early on in his career, and just followed his journey, and just someone that I greatly respect. And he's underrated. He doesn't get the love that he deserves. He puts it on for New York, and it's just a shame. But he does great things for the community. Like I said, we talked about this recently too. He just opened up his own store in Harlem,
Yeah.
the deli. And he's doing great things. He's continuing the marathon for Nipsey Hussle, and people should really look at Dave East and what he's doing out here and praise him for his music, please, and just what he does off the field, out of the studio,
For sure.
because he's doing great things in and out the studio.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
What was it like taking the time to interview him and sit down with him?
It was great because I actually felt, because that was like the interview that was really just. Because that was like huge. Dave East. I got a Dave East interview.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I describe it as I didn't know that was in me, and I felt as though I had like an alter ego inside of me, and
Yeah.
I turned on that microphone, and it was just so natural, and
Yeah.
I got to sit there, and it was a vibe. Like we
For
just
sure.
vibe like I knew him. It was weird. We just vibe. I was the only college radio personality ever. He said it on the show to have him freestyle. I had him freestyle for me, so
Wow.
that meant a lot for me
Yeah.
to get him to freestyle on my show. Being in college, being my favorite artist, and be the first to do that. So I'm always someone out there breaking records, and that was definitely a record for me, just getting him to spit that freestyle for me over Mobb Deep's Eye for an Eye.
That's dope, man. And also, a good hip hop friend of Dave East, G Herbo. You got the chance to interview him back in December of 2021.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit about that experience, because I know that you asked him questions about Nipsey Hussle and his impact in the community, and also having PSD and just overall just trauma.
I was invited out there to do an interview with G Herbo on his 25 tour, because it was his 25 tour out in New Jersey in December, and that really helped me put my independent platform on the map, because I was independent. I like to say I was independent 4 years, because I was getting the interviews myself. Okay, it was myself that I got those interviews, and it was that G Herbo was a solidification right there. It solidified me that, hey, I'm independent now, and Max is here, and it's just he's on his way. And interviewing him, because I like to bring my guests through their journey and speak on important things. I don't want to know about the relationships, the negativity. I heard about his PTSD, so I wanted to bring that to the forefront. And I asked him, I think it was a pivotal question. Was his PTSD, was it difficult for him to come out and admit that he had PTSD? Because if there's other people out there that are struggling, whatever it is, it doesn't even have to be PTSD to come out and speak about what they're going through, to make them feel comfortable so they can solve it or go through some type of therapy to get that healed and just feel better about themselves and not afraid to speak out about what they're going through. And that's something I did with his interview, and asked him about Nipsey Hussle, because he does a lot for schools in Chicago.
Yeah, he bought a school in Chicago, right?
He bought a school in Chicago. I wanted to bring that up, and just so that we can just keep the good that people are doing for communities highlighted, and so that other people can follow through and keep going on. That's the main thing I do in my interviews. It's always about their career. I never focus on the negativity, because I hate it. I want to be the personality that's liked, not hated. People always go for the clickbaity thing, and sometimes that makes the guests angry when you ask them something that's so controversial. So I stay away from that. I want to make it like it's like a documentary type of interview when we do it, but then we get on serious subjects, like my interview with my son. We did like that whole interview. We didn't get into his rap career until like the last 25 minutes of the interview.
Great interview, by the way.
Oh, thank you, man.
I just watched it too.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so we got into like everything that he's done out there for Black Lives Matter marches and going out there and speaking at the George Floyd and everything that he's doing out there. I wanted to cover that, because at the end of the day, that's life, and that's more important than music. And I made sure to get that covered for him.
Yeah, it's dope what my son is doing.
Shout out to my son.
I really like him because he always talks about just leadership, in the community, and also just like bridging those gaps that we always talk about, like trying to get the younger people to, carry on the torch, because at some point, we're going to have to, lead the way the best way we know how. We may not have all the tools and the resources, but we got to try something, something's got to give.
No, you're right.
For sure.
You're absolutely right.
And what do you think, with my son, with him going to prison and stuff like that, like what's your perspective on, the incarceration system in America, like the judicial system?
It's the systemic racism that black people face in America. You just look into it. He was wrongfully convicted, and you hear about, because we covered about it. Rapists and pedophiles get out within like a short term, but someone that was wrongfully convicted of, what was it, armed robbery, I think it was, or assault, and he didn't even do it. That just proves it to me right there, because he had to go away for like 7 years.
Right.
That just proves it right there. That systemic racism is there, and there needs to be something done about it. And these politicians have to step up. They got to step up, and we have to vote. You have to vote, because people don't go out there. They always preach, "Oh, vote, and your vote doesn't count." Your vote, it does count, because you got to vote for who's going into Congress. You got to vote for who's going to be governor, mayor, and all these seats, judges. All those matter, because if those seats aren't filled with the right people,
Right.
how's the president going to pass what he wants to pass? That's going to help everybody out in the end.
Mm.
And I think that's why you're seeing Biden not pass a lot of stuff out there right now. I mean, he just passed the anti-lynching bill. I mean, it only took 100 years, but he just passed that, the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill, which was important. But there's so many other bills out there, police brutality, that need to be passed. And it's these Republican congressmen and that are out there holding it back and not letting it pass through. And if we got the right people in office and in the Congress and stuff, we could make things happen more easy. But then you get someone like Trump in there, and he sets us back to the 50s.
Right. But how do you get, a generation like our generation, the young generation, like the kids from the 90s and the 2000s, to want to kind of take on those positions? Because you see a lot of people now, is like everybody's just jumping to the entertainment field. So how do you how do you direct it to where, there is that diversity within, these fields, that there are people that look like you and I, or people that think like you and I, that can be put in these positions?
I really do think it's just it's the education factor. There's got to be some outlet that opens up, which was what the hip hop BET summits were back in the day, spoke about real things. I think that's why you don't see like the younger kids and the youth getting involved, and even the older ones, as you mentioned, like from the 90s and like our age.
Yeah.
They really got to find that. They got to find a way to educate themselves. And you got to blame the schools too, because the schools, I talked about this with my son, they whitewash everything. They whitewash a lot of stuff. Like I didn't learn about Black Wall Street in high school. I had to find out about that by myself. They taught us about Martin Luther King,
Right.
and that's about it. And like maybe the Underground Railroad, but they didn't teach us about the Nation of Islam. They didn't teach us about Malcolm X. I mean, they spoke very briefly about it, but it's not to the point as what they should be doing out there. And I think if they really taught the truth and were really exposing what's really out there, I think maybe more people would be vocal about it, and it would open up for people of all races to come out and work together and just build on that, put up a platform, build on it.
Yeah, man. Wow. That's true, bro.
Yeah.
And it's sad, because even, in my school that I went to, a public school, but it was in a predominantly white area, you know what I'm saying? Me coming from Boston, I was a part of this program called MECO, which what they do is they take kids from the inner city of Boston, and then you go to suburban and rural areas, but you're going to public schools out there. So it's just like, you're not really learning information that could, that's teaching you about your past when it comes to Black history. Yeah, they're going to tell you about Martin Luther King, but they're not telling you more so about the knowledge that is going to help you build or just give you the confidence. And not saying that MLK, wasn't doing that, because he definitely was, but I just feel like there needs to be more of a platform or more of a resource. Maybe the teachers, maybe they have to diversify, the people that they're hiring there.
Yeah, that we talked about that with my son too, hiring more Black professors. And I'd say like one of the greatest, not professors, but teachers I had in high school was my religion teacher, Dr. or Professor Uma. I remember I had him, and he was like one of the greatest teachers I ever had, because he taught us a lot about racism, and he was a religion teacher, and I learned more from him in my final year in high school than I learned from anyone else in my 3 other years there. Well, the other teachers in my 4th year, and it just opens you up to it gets you out. It's the meeting of the minds. as they say. If you that's what college is for too. It's supposed to open you up to all different walks of life. You know, that's just how it was. Like when I got there my freshman year, I heard that I was going to be dorming with lacrosse players, and I was like, oh my God, these white lacrosse players, you got to be freaking kidding me. But then when I got to know them and they got to know me, we were cool. Like, and shout out to those guys too. You know, it was a great freshman year. It was definitely an experience with them. I know it was crazy times, but you know, it opened up my mind and not to be so close-minded. And you know, college changed my life for the best instead of the worst. You know, you had some negatives in there, but it was more positive than negative.
And do you feel like with you know, just you getting what was I gonna say? Just like I can't even think of the word right now. I just had such a crazy day today. But like a higher education. That's what I wanted to say. Like how do you think that's necessary?
Like
for
like
for
going
people?
for a graduate program and stuff like that.
Well, just going to like college and you know, or university.
I think everyone's life is different. I mean, you're gonna do what you're gonna do. Like me, I mean, sometimes I sit back because I haven't gotten to where I want to be in the position yet of doing my thing, having a big radio show on a big station. And
for sure,
I look at it as I wouldn't be in the position right now if I didn't go to college because I wouldn't have a show at all. So it's like I'm thankful for that. So every position's different, and you know everyone's got to do what they got to do. You know, Kanye had to drop out of college, and then that was his thing, and he made it his own way. So everyone's path is different. Everyone's path, journey and path is different.
That's true, man. I do think that college, I wouldn't say it's necessary, but I do feel like it is important.
Yeah.
Because it does give you the opportunity to network.
Absolutely. And networking, yeah, that's another thing that you got to bring up, networking, and just that just goes hand in hand. And you just got to take advantage when you're there. You know, time is money. Time is of the essence. That's something that my mom instilled in me when I went there. She's like, you got to make the most of your time because it'll be gone like this. I made the most of my time in college. You know, I have no regrets. I have nothing that I wish that I did different or something I did. You know, I went and did something else. I feel as though I accomplished everything there was in college.
Most definitely. Yeah. And it proves with your radio show and just your overall, just your demeanor, how you carry yourself with confidence and how you know what you want for yourself, you know? And that's something that in the classroom they don't teach you because a lot of people feel like, okay, you know, if I get the A's and B's, then that's going to lead to me getting a good job. But, you know, it doesn't always work out like that. You know, there's people that were probably on a roll and, you know, had straight A's, but they can't find a decent job that's going to help them because, you know, it's more so like the certification aspect. Like when you get that A, you know, it's a good validation for you, but at the end of the day, it's not going to secure your bag. You know, it's not going to set you up, you know, for where you need to be necessarily.
No.
It's more so about, you know, networking and also putting in the groundwork, like how you and I are doing. You know, we took the time to really do the research to build our independent platforms, and they're still growing. You know, we're not there yet because we just started out in our careers, but, you know, at some point in time, we will get there.
Absolutely.
Know?
You already know it.
For sure, bro. And is there anything else you want to, you know, let the people know as far as like, you know, what you're working on and, you know, different things that you have going on for yourself, bro?
Yeah, just like I said, I'm going to continue doing my shows. You know, I do it every week, Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can check out the show on YouTube, Sports and Hip Hop with DJ Mad Max. Make sure you subscribe. Check us out on Live 365, Mad Max Radio. I built my own independent radio station during the pandemic, and check it out on iHeart and the podcasting platforms, all that, Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher. I'm on all the podcasting platforms. I know I'm always working on getting interviews and doing big shows, and just, you know, I'm ready to take that next leap and getting into acting. I'm ready because I'm here to get what's mine.
Most definitely, man. I was thinking too, yo, one of these days, man, we got to do, I don't know, like a TV show together or something like that. Like, I was always thinking, like, you know, it would be funny if we do like a sitcom or some shit like that, like a comedy sitcom. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we should. That'd be dope.
Man. But I want to thank you for coming on to the Y Podcast.
Yeah, man.
And I also have a gift for you, bro.
Oh, really? You didn't have to get me.
Yes, sir, man. You already know. But
you didn't have to get me no gift. Oh man, Oh man, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. That
I
was
appreciate
from
I'll show that up to the camera here. I think the camera can see that. Shout out to Andrew for making this to me. And that's special right there.
no
That's
doubt,
special,
man.
right? Why DJ Mad Max radio personality and journalist. And I
Yeah.
remember when you had me send you this picture.
Hmm.
You want a picture of me where how would you describe it? It was a picture? You had your own phrase for
Hmm.
what picture you used, a specific picture that you wanted me to send you.
Well, I was thinking that, the picture should just kind of describe more so like what you're about. You know what I'm saying? A picture that kind of represents your youth in a sense, and pretty much saying like, it displays like where you come from, you know what I'm saying? Because, they always say pictures say 1,000 words. So, there's a lot of you just resonate with certain pictures. And I just felt like, when you sent me that picture of you being in the WSJU radio station, I was like, wow, this really was like the beginning of your career, and then you can just see how focused you are on what you want to do. So that's really,
Yeah.
what it stems from.
It does.
Yeah.
I chose that picture, born alone, die alone. That's me right now in my independent state. I left there by myself. We know what happened. And, I was always working by myself, and I'm cool with that. I'm cool with rolling solo. You don't need 30 snakes. You need 5 real friends. That's all you need.
For sure, bro. Well, I want to thank you for coming on to the Why podcast, and sharing your story. And I'm very grateful
Thanks,
for you
man.
being here. It almost did not happen, but we made it here. So I just want to thank you, bro. And I look forward to see what you got going on in the future, man.
I appreciate that, man. And we plug the socials in here and everything.
Oh yeah. Go ahead, bro.
All right, yeah. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at @TheRealMax, TheReelMax. Again, TheReelMax, and Sports Hip Hop with DJ Mad Max. You know what it is, and I know you're gonna close out. Sky's the limit, though.
Yes, it is. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Young Cornbread. Or you could also check out my business page, which is Cornbread Media on Instagram. And yeah, man, thank you, bro.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Great show. Keep it up. One of the best up and coming in the making.
I appreciate it.
Forget the Power 105s. Forget the big radio stations. Come to the Y Podcast at Brooklyn Podcast Studio. You know what it is. Young Cornbread. Shout out to him.
Or appreciate it, bro. And thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man.
Peace.
Peace out.